Greetings, friends. Just had to restart the stream. Had a little bit of an issue there again with server connection to Twitch. Don't know what's going on with that. It's not my end. I double checked it, but that's the way it's going. I guess I don't know. So, hope everyone had a good weekend. I certainly had an eventful weekend. Over at PAX Unplugged. Probably one of the single largest tabletop-focused gaming conventions in the country. Certainly the biggest I've been to date, and I've been to quite a few conventions, including several Gen Cons and Origins. So it was definitely an experience. It was a big thrill jumping on there and running games at something of that scale. Head over to the website now. First, I'll do my usual intro here from the Tomes, Twitch TV from the Tomes. If you're watching it here, you know where to find me. YouTube at Fox and Boar Games. foxandboargames.com is the landing pad. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Fox and Boar Games. Thanks a lot for everybody for tuning in, liking, subscribing, following, doing all those things. I have a blog post up this morning. Pull that up for you. And obviously I'm not going to sit here and read the blog post because that would be a little weird. I mean, making things weird, but over at my website I have the news updates, and the title is "It's Good to Be Back." And there's me getting ready to run games at Free Play. And I guess I can't stress that enough, that was kind of my enduring thoughts for the weekend. So some of you who are in fact regulars here met me at gaming conventions for the first time. In some cases, a very long time ago. In some cases, perhaps 3 decades ago. For as unbelievable as that is. 3 decades ago. So, yeah, and I did it for a long time. I did a lot for a long time. And some of you who were with me during that time know that I was doing this kind of thing like almost every weekend for a while, for several years. Mostly once we got into the Vampire LARPs and other, events beyond just playing at the tabletop or trying out a new game. But even once I had kind of stopped LARPing, I still was going to these cons, and I was doing some miniature gaming, some board gaming. For a while, I'd hooked up with some friends who were running a miniature World War II tactical game miniature, tank-based tactical game miniature company, and I went to some historical war game stuff with them. I was a pretty regular on these things in the Northeast for quite a while. And then it just kind of faded, I mean, I think as these things do, I guess I got a little more serious about finishing college, so I stopped spending as much time gaming. There's a lot of irony in that. There's a huge amount of irony in that I kind of can't even really go into here because it's just these layers of life choices. But, it's kind of funny that after all of that, I ended up coming back to gaming in the last few years, especially during the pandemic, and it starts to become like this thing, I pursued a fine arts degree, a photography degree, as a lot of people know, which I've used in a professional sense in one way or another most of my life, and then on to web design, which was an extension of imaging, eventually into college teaching of all this stuff, all this kind of media. But the reality is, the thing that I always really loved doing, which is writing and running games, is now a thing. And that really was driven home. And I mean, I knew it, right? I knew it over the past few years. I knew it's been going on for almost 10 years as Critical Role became popular, as D&D became popularized in mass media. Just had a whole Metallica Stranger Things discussion on Facebook with a friend of mine, and how it's convenient that they released this thrashy sounding song, right when at the peak of popularity. I won't go down that rabbit hole. PJ's not here. PJ's not here to encourage me, so they'll probably come back up Wednesday night. But you know, I, whoever knew that maybe if I had just stuck with writing games, it would have been like that thing. I could have been on this edge. But I mean, there was no industry for it for years. For up until really the last 5 or 6 years, the idea that anyone was going to make a living doing any of this was insane. And I'm still not sure how long this is going to last. But while it's lasting, I'm going to really enjoy it. I'm going to really have fun. I'm going to have, a blast. And it's good to be back. The weekend had a much bigger impact on me than I ever anticipated when I realized how much I liked sitting down and running these games at conventions. Because I kind of tuned myself out of doing it for a very long time. It's been at least 25 years since I've run a game at a convention. And meanwhile, I used to do everything from D&D, Shadowrun, Call of Cthulhu. I probably ran a few other random tabletop games, but those were the big ones. I ran a vampire tabletop once. It was all my friends that signed up from the LARPs. I was like basically just sitting around with the gaming group. But I was at one point involved with groups running live action role play of up to 200 people. So this wasn't a small thing even then. And at the time I realized people who were running these things, and in one or two cases, not my good friends who were doing it, but a few other cases, there were people making decent money at it even then. And it's when I first came back to LARPing, playing music at LARPs, medieval music at LARPs, that I kind of looked around and I thought, they got 200 people here who each paid $1,000 for a weekend. Now, I guarantee that's food included. That's nice housing. That's things that are generally not, it's like going on a little vacation. If gaming's your vacation. And I kind of sat back and said, wow, this is becoming a thing. I mean, the Lord of the Rings movies, Harry Potter movies, Game of Thrones, all that came into this mass culture, brought this all into mass culture, where it never really was before. And it's way bigger now than I even thought it was going to be. I mean, 30,000 people midday Saturday was crazy. It was crazy seeing that many people. And the best part is the vibe was really chill. There was no issue. There was no thing that was going on anywhere that I saw that created any sense of discord or discomfort. I'm sure there were. I'm sure there were people who were being jerks, but not that I saw. So my whole intent on going to the convention, of course, was to promote Tales of the Heartland. That's to run some games of it, get some feedback. I'll talk about that in a moment. But mostly just to get it out there, to get it in front of people, just so people saw that this thing was happening. More than just, the 20 people who follow me diligently online, which I am hugely grateful for. But I need more people to see it. Now, this was kind of the wrong place to do it, because it's so huge. Trying to get anybody's attention at this thing. And I first got there, I signed up for the Unpub stations, the Unpub table. Which was a paid table reservation where you have this kind of guaranteed spot in this smaller expo hall where people come by and talk about your game. Well, what I didn't realize is that Unpub was almost entirely, and I had written them and they thought this was a great idea. I mean, they just wanted people to fill the table. I get that. But what I was offering, even in terms of role playing, was so far and away from what most of the people walking in the Unpub hall would have wanted. Let's see. Well, hey, Wolfie, what's going on? Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping it embeds now. D&D is there were lines like through the entire Philadelphia Convention Hall to sign up for a spot in a D&D game. And I'm like looking at this and I'm thinking, wow. This whole thing has just so massively transformed. And by the way, Wolfie, good to see you. Sorry you're wondering where I was Wednesday. So I bagged out of Wednesday because I really had to get the preparatory materials for this game done. The game's done and presenting at the con done. And I put a note up, but not everybody saw it. There's Blake. Beyond anything we could have ever. I mean, this weekend was driving it home like it's beyond anything I could ever have imagined. Huge. So, trying to get anybody's attention at this thing. Yeah, no, exactly. Oh, absolutely. None of us could have. Absolutely none of us could have. And I had two of my students were there this weekend, and I talked to both of them. And again, like they like it's great because they don't get just how underground it was and how you were like considered basically like a satanic cultist if you played D&D in the 80s, or some other, fringe group. Only some of us were satanic cultists, but it was just like just looking around and it was absolutely mind blowing. It's kind of like my response going to like Merciful Fate and Iron Maiden and seeing kids there. Like Merciful Fate, there's King Diamond up on stage screaming about, "Oh my Lord Satan, I pledge my soul to thee," and there are like people with kids like cheering along, and yeah, okay, we know it's all well. Maybe in King Diamond's case, it's not entirely theatrics because he's a Satanist, but. It's largely theatrical. The show is theatrical. Iron Maiden's just a visual spectacle. You could be 10 years old and enjoy it because it's a giant stage show. It's like watching a play, But still, it's that same thing where you're like, wow, times have really changed. And I don't mind. Satanism is largely theatrical anyway. Satanism is supposed to be theatrical. It's not about worshiping a devil, it is about making a social statement by agitating is really what it's about. And it always has been. Even LaVey for his, like I watched some of the old videos of LaVey in his devil pajamas doing his ritual, and I'm just like, people were afraid of this guy. Like this is so hilarious. This guy's just hilarious. Like he's clearly like got all these people who are just there for the drugs and the orgy, and he's doing this whole satanic ritual. And it was just like, and it's a similar kind of thing. You were in the same category. If you were into that music and playing D&D, it was even worse, as a lot of us were. So, but like sitting there this weekend, so I'm sitting there in the Unplugged station, and I'm staying there for about a half an hour. And again, this is like all these like really quick prototype games of various levels of polish, which was awesome because I walked around, I looked at them, and they were all cool. And I do have a tabletop game on deck, a board game. But this was nothing absolutely that I fit into. And more so, like, everything was so family friendly. And here I am with my, sword and sorcery game ripe with all that occultism and, theatrical gore that we were just talking about. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, I'm in the wrong spot. I screwed this up. And I fully realized, like, I had totally misread, like, where I should have been. So I was talking to Curzon, Tom, who's on here quite regularly. And, he said, well, I was an RPG free play. There was a sign-up sheet. I'm like... And this was like pretty much like just down the hall. So like I just folded up my laptop and asked the guy next to me to keep it on my table for a minute. I went down and I talked to the free play people. They were like, hey, we are still looking for game masters. So, so I wrote my one student who has an awesome board game and said, Chris, I've got slots open. Just take my slots. I don't care. You don't have to pay me for them. Just buy yourself a day pass and come in and run your game tomorrow. And his game was a huge success. And I knew it would be. And I'm hoping to publish it with him and for him. Because it's like, I'm looking at this and I'm like, he originally thought it was going to be for kids. It's a pirate game about collecting treasure as you're going down a whirlpool. And you have to fight the other pirates and avoid the whirlpool. It's great. It's this great game. And he thought it was just going to be like kids would play this. I'm like, no, man. I'm like, my group of 30 to 35 and up are all going to want to play this. We're all going to want to make our own ships. We're all going to want to, we're going to want ship models. I'm like, this has such huge potential. So I'm glad it worked out that way because he came on Saturday, he took my 2 slots and he went to town with it. So then I just signed up for a like short notice. I signed up for the 6 p.m. Friday night slot and I only had like an hour. So of course I got nobody. It was a little frustrating. Friday was a very frustrating day because the city was very hard to navigate because of the Christmas market, because of other events going on. I almost didn't find parking. I paid an astronomical amount for parking. I didn't want to talk about it. Like almost as much as it cost me in 2 days as much to park as it did just to get into the convention. But that's the way things go. And it was still a cheap investment. Mind you, I'm not talking thousands of dollars. So by the end of the night on Friday I was done. I hung out for a little bit. I talked to a few people. I actually hung out with the people running the RPG area for a while and talked to them. And I actually really kind of hit it off with them. So they actually hooked me up with a couple leads. So again, it wasn't a loss. It wasn't a loss. So I put in for 2 Saturday games, and I get there early Saturday, come in, and my sheet is full. My sheet for the game is full. And I'm like, all right. And I get to the room, and within a few minutes, they showed up, and they were all raring to go to try this new game. And that was thrilling. That was, like, absolutely thrilling. And it was a great group. And I posted a little bit on Facebook and Instagram. I just posted a short on YouTube regarding just the group playing. They were really good role players. 3 of them knew each other. I think it was a husband and wife and a brother-in-law or a brother. I didn't know. I didn't ask. I'm not worried. They all had the same last name. So, and it was clear that they were a family. And then another guy who just joined in. But they were all like super into the role play aspect in the world. Like they read the description. They're like, this is really cool. I'm like, cool, good. I'm glad you like it. And then they got like way into their characters, way into the story. And I was like, this is amazing. And so we had a really good game. We had a really good 3 hours. They completed the adventure. They caught on to all the clues really quickly. Like they were, out of all the groups I've run it for, even my Thursday night group in which Blake was in, they just kind of banged through it really, really quickly. They're like, yeah, we play a lot of mystery type games, and I'm like, okay, cool, and there were some great takeaways, and the 2 best compliments that could have been afforded to me were the die system. Like there were suggestions, which was perfectly fine, and one of them I've taken. Even again, well, I'll get to that in a minute, but he's like, it makes you feel kind of epic, like rolling these dice and looking for these 10s to do double damage and knocking your opponents across the room. I'm like, all right, this is what I wanted. And the other compliment I got from one of the other fellows who was there was the world is really unique and really interesting. And that was, of course, that has been my big focus the entire time, is the world building and the characters, the character cultures. Anyone who's been watching this channel knows I've spent months and months on that. And I consider the system mostly done. Haha. Surprise on me, right? Not to mention that last week I had the major realization that the essence system and the corruption system, which Blake had pointed out at one point, and we kind of glossed over it because we didn't ever really encounter it during the game. It just wasn't working. Like it like there was a point that it wasn't going to work anymore as it was written. So there I was last week rewriting part of it. So the part of the game that was suggested to me, the only part that people found confusion in, that I noticed throughout the entire table. Again, this is only 4 people, and I already have some plans to take it in some other environments and test it, was the way that critical success is what I call strokes of fortune work. And when you get a 10 on a die, it does one of 2 things. In combat, it gives you double damage, or if you're resisting damage, it gives you a double success. Not in combat, you could take that success, basically, and give a +1 pip to any die. Kind of nicking a little bit off the D6 Star Wars, because there are some systems in there that are similar, and I don't deny it. But it was unique enough. Now, the only thing people said is it really needs to just... Like, the one guy was like... He plays a lot of games. This guy clearly played a lot of role-playing games and board games. He was like, this is a little confusing. And I take that kind of feedback very seriously. So I thought about it, and I thought about juggling the numbers, and I thought about, well, if I go to, it just gives double successes, that takes away the advantage of, if you get that 10, you might hit a target number that you can never normally hit. That was the whole point of it. The double successes is to speed up combat, because combat is still slow. Like, combat in any of these games is slow. But this was still slower. The combats in this game were still a little slower than I wanted. That could have been scenario design, and it could have been this that we're addressing now. So I went back and forth over the next 24 hours. And I kind of took away this idea that, well, all right, if the whole point in this game is character choice and to be epic, give them the option of both on any D10 roll. And I ran it by Blake and Curzon and Neil and some of the other folks who've been doing this with me since day one. They're all like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like, just let people choose. Like, you can, on any die roll that you score a 10 on, you can get an additional +1 to any die. Or you to get multiple successes, or you can just choose to get an automatic success if you roll high enough. I mean, in some cases, neither will really benefit you, but now, in any case, usually, at least one of those situations will benefit you. Because I did see a number of cases where I already got 4 successes. I don't really need another one for this type of roll. But if they had been able to raise it up and get the next level of success, because the challenges are staged, like if you're finding information, if you score an average success, you find out this amount of information. If you score a difficult success, you find out more. So this is a case where the player can just choose. That was the really big takeaway. So here I am saying, I think the system's pretty much done. I'm just really fleshing out the world now. And after one play test, I see something that can improve the system. Now, what I'm not going to get in the habit of doing is changing the system every time I have a play test. I can't. Like, this is something that has been bothering me. The fact that the dice do 2 different things has been bothering me since day one. There was another suggestion as to how the essence works. And I think it was just that player's preference in terms of how the essence would work, and that they didn't like the way it worked. I've had enough other players look at it, including other player using magic at the table, who didn't seem to think this was an issue. So that I'm just going to let stand for now. I mean, if I get a lot of feedback over the next couple months of people saying, "Oh no, this essence system is too confusing, or it's too much rolling," I don't think it is. I mean, again, I also come from systems, like Warhammer and Middle-earth roleplay that are, so dice heavy and so crunchy and so random sometimes that they're, it's more of push the game till you fail versus actually your character has a chance to succeed. So, I don't think I'm going to rush to change anything else. But I thought that was a valid suggestion, and something I noticed all the players. And even the group that's playing it now regularly sometimes have to ask me, like, okay, well, what does the die do now? And that is a problem. And if at this point this many people are indicating through play that it's a little confusing, then it's a little confusing. And just because it's crystal clear in my mind doesn't mean that it is. So that was the takeaway. But, so there was that. I got some playtest feedback, and I'm already looking at another con up in Massachusetts. And I know there's a couple of MA people here. I don't see PJ. I'll have to talk to him. I think he lives right near this. I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know Massachusetts geography very well. In February, that's pretty role play specific. So I might look into an overnight there. I'll have to evaluate costs and all those other things, and if anything else is going on, and have it provisionally. If there's a blizzard, I'm not coming. Unlike last time I went to New England in the winter, and I got stuck in a blizzard on the way home. No fun. It wasn't even fun anecdotally. There was just nothing fun about it. But so my second slot didn't run, which actually very much surprised me, because 3 p.m. Saturday. Well, it doesn't surprise me. So, because I did talk to the people at the role-playing table a little bit about this. 3 p.m. Saturday, and I did kind of lurk in the sign-up room and didn't tell anybody it was my game. Just kind of listened to what people were saying. And I did hear one group say, "This looks cool, but I don't want to be here for 4 hours." So, 3 p.m., yes, it's prime. It's prime Saturday if you want to play your D&D game. It's also prime for literally hundreds of other events going on at that moment. It's also the single most crowded time of the convention. So unless someone's really intent on playing a new game at that time, they're going to find other things to do. So I think that was my flaw there. Now, it was suggested, the RPG folks were like, well, the other option is like a 4 p.m. or a 4-hour slot, like from 8 to 11, or first thing in the morning when people get there, is something they might want to do. They said maybe come up with a variation of your scenario, or a different scenario that you can use the same characters with that is shorter, to just introduce people to the game. Like really, like boom, 1 to 1.5 hours. You sit down, you run through one combat encounter, one social interaction encounter, and the game's done. And that's a very valid way to put this out there. So I was glad. And again, I didn't feel my time was wasted. That's when I went to the exhibition hall and the dealer's room. Well, the old days we called it a dealer's room. This is an exhibition hall because it's massive. Some of you saw my and other people's video and photos from there, and it was just like. And again, that's when I really realized the scale of all this, and what, even in the 3 years of the pandemic, since the last time I went to this convention, how huge it was. And when I say you could barely move through the convention hall, and there were a lot of people there for RPGs. There were more for tabletop, well, more for board games. This is still largely a board gaming con, and all the role playing is kind of just as it's gained momentum filtered in. But it is generally tabletop. So again, I don't feel my time was wasted. So I put in a slot for Saturday night, and I put it in kind of late. I put it in with only about an hour and a half to spare because I really wasn't sure if I really was committed to running a slot into the night. That I'm like, you know what, I'm here for gaming. Like, I'm here to run this game. Like, let's try it. And I actually had a couple people interested, and they all, and the one kind of ongoing response I got was, it's like we've been going all day. We don't really feel like learning a new system now, you know? And that was kind of like, okay, but you know, I get it. I really do get it because I was exhausted too. So, you know, part of me was like, I don't feel like running another game, but I'm here to promote this game. So again, I took that time before I got myself out to dinner. I took that time to just wander around a couple different gaming halls and just listen to games and watch games and talk to people a little bit and just get a feel for where their heads were with stuff, particularly with new games. And I handed out a good number of my little promotional flyers. I mean, everyone here knows where to find the game, but I'll put one of those up here with its little QR code. My fancy little promotional flyer. So I gave a number of these out. I even gave one out gave one out at Iron Hill, the pub right around the corner, to a couple people I sat near, who were from the gaming convention, who I ended up chatting with. And you know, for as much as you can do online, the reality is it's still different when you have first contact at an in-person event. It is different. It does make a difference. It does make an impact. And it was definitely worthwhile going. Let's see, I don't see that flyer. I might have stuck it on my external drive once it was done. So I think the big takeaway is, and haven't really made this a secret, but I've been kind of in that space the past couple months. You know, whatever I have to do in terms of returning to academia to subsist and make money, at least for the time being, that is definitely, you know, gonna be a discussion and a decision in the next few months. So basically, I'm on sabbatical through the summer. I, you know, I've had a lot of my own kind of angst in terms of how to position myself in the world of gaming. You know, I'm not 30 years old when this is just emerging, and I can kind of be on that other edge of this rising storm, you know, but I have this huge amount of experience in writing these things and in running these things, and you know, I'm fairly confident that I probably won't, you know, I don't know if I can make a full-time career out of it, but I could definitely, there's my little, in case anyone pops on here and wants to scan it, I'm pretty confident I could at least get this company up and going, and part of that also do some event and game organization at the professional level. Now, I'm also keenly aware it won't be my game. You know, it will be D&D or another popular game. Call of Cthulhu has risen in popularity, and I am regularly seeing people post and say, I want to learn how to play Call of Cthulhu. I want to play with an experienced keeper. Well, that's me. And there are some out there, not as much as D&D, of course. And I'm going to be really honest. There are a lot of great professional DMs out there. I've watched a couple, and I'm like, they're because they also have theater background. I mean, not even Critical Role only, but a few others that I've watched. But I've also watched a few that I'm like, they're really, I mean, they're good, but they're there. You know, they're good, but they're not. They're lacking in some aspect in terms of presentation. And I watch it and I think, I could do that. Yeah, the people who are professional actors, that's a whole different ballgame. Yeah, I'm not an actor. That's not what I ever claimed to do. But I think part of my angst has been, like, do you really want to do that? Do you really want to run games at this point for strangers? And I think the big takeaway from this weekend, now I only had the one session, I had very good players. I didn't have a bunch of players who were there bored and complaining, which is always a possibility. But my takeaway was, no, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed being back. I really enjoyed running games at a convention. I wasn't sure if I would. I really wasn't sure if I would. I really had a concern that I would sit down to do this, and I was kind of over it. And I would just be exhausted and frustrated and, but it was really enjoyable. And I think come the first of the year, I'm going to start filtering myself out there to run some things online. Now, according to contract, I can't make money while I'm on sabbatical. So, the goal would be then to perhaps just run a few games. Maybe I start on Roll20 and try to generate some interest and see if people like the way I game master, see if people like my storytelling style, see if they like my games. I mean, it doesn't really do me any good to get out there and attempt to do it if I find that people and I are not jiving. So I think this was a good push for me. I think that was my big takeaway for the weekend. Because I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed doing this years ago, and I'd kind of let it slide and kind of gotten out of it. In the group that I would normally go with, Blake among them. Later it was Neil, who's on here. A couple of our other friends who we gamed with from the various groups would all make like going to a con a thing. Now while Curzon was running Blight Realms, which I contributed to the writing of, we went with Tom and Craig a few times, and that was fun, but I was kind of just a support role. It's kind of like I'd just show up and hang out and talk about the game a little bit and, this kind of stuff. I didn't feel like I was really doing the work with that. And Tom was running 3 and 4 games a day of it, or two to three games a day of it. But I do think it is something I'm going to pursue. And, I'll do it a few more times. I hope to get a few more in before the summer. I will not probably be doing any of the big conventions this year. I don't think I can afford it, frankly. I don't think it's going to be that and anything else. And I don't think the game's ready to go to like Origins or Gen Con or anything like that yet. I mean, I think PAX PAX took me by surprise in that it's become PAX Unplugged. Took me by surprise because it was much bigger than it was 2 years ago when I went, or almost 3 years ago. 3 years ago, it was much bigger. And again, I felt like I kind of got lost in the shuffle because it was just so overwhelming. Well, that's not necessarily bad either. So what else did I find out? I found out that I definitely need to work on the characters a little bit more in terms of the game. Like I found out a couple of the playtest characters I'd forgotten to give them important skills, and that was fine. I just kind of was like, oops, sorry guys, write it in. No one had a problem with that. I already got some feedback from my feedback forums. I made a feedback form which I sent to some of my some of the people who have played the game that I know personally, just to get any other feedback. And as of last night, I had gotten two more pieces of feedback from people who played it at the con, and it was overwhelmingly positive, which again was nice. Because no matter how good you feel about something like this, until you walk out with it and show it to people, you just don't have any clue how people are going to receive it. I made some observations. The first of which is that this is a niche within a niche. This game is so radically different in feel and in atmosphere and in environment and in character types and in play style than something like D&D. Like, it's not something everybody's going to want to play. I even said that so it was this very nice young woman and, young, to me, of course. She wasn't that young. Young woman and her mom who came up, and her mom was an artist, and she really loved the artwork. And she thought about playing this game, and I talked to them for about 5 minutes, and I was like, they are not going to enjoy this game. I mean, maybe they will, but the content of it, my presentation of it, this is something that they could really walk away from, like, not thinking this is a very fun environment or very fun game, because it is darker. It is more heavy metal. It is, all these things that are sword and sorcery. And that's the other thing. Again, it doesn't dawn on me that a lot of people under the age of 40 don't even know the term sword and sorcery. So, while right here I call it a sword and sorcery role-playing game, I might have to do some rebranding. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to... Whoops. I don't know what else I would necessarily call it. I could come up with... I was working on this last night. Some marketing and some brainstorming. It was marketing and positioning ideas. Like, how do I interface it? Because, like, the scenario we're playing right now in person is more or less of a murder mystery. It could be in Game of Thrones. It's very city-oriented. There has been a little bit of combat. There is this sort of, let's say, well, exactly. And so, like I said, what really was the appeal, I think, to this group that sat down to play it was, I said in the description that it is role play. I forget what term I used. I didn't use roleplay heavy, because it's not really roleplay heavy. I mean, people could go through this whole scenario and not roleplay. It's more fun if they do. But I said something like roleplay encouraged or something like that. And clearly they showed up because of that, and because of this description of it being this kind of dark, like, heavy metal-ish, cartoon heavy metal, meaning, fantasy world that's, more Conan-esque than it is D&D. And again, we've talked at length about how D&D has really changed in and of itself. Like, D&D, in a way, is more like the Star Wars universe now. That there is this vast number of weird creatures you can meet and role play and these weird environments you can explore versus it being an extension of a Tolkien-esque fantasy. So it is different. It is a different game now. We'll talk all about that in Wednesday night's chat on Magic, high versus low versus medium. And I was thinking the high magic of D&D is a big appeal. I think that the players were simultaneously intrigued with the magic in this game because they realized how powerful it could be, but they also realized that it comes at a price. And that's been the whole point all along. I mean, again, it has that kind of Elric tone to it, that Stormbringer RPG tone to it, that, yeah, there's magic, and you can do really amazing things with it, even right out of the gate. Like, the one guy was like, you mean I could just drop this globe of balefire and it'll just start sucking out the essence of all the things around it? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, you can do that. He was like really shocked that, like, this kind of intro character could do something like that. So, I'm like, yeah, but you're also going to start draining out your essence when you do that. And if any of your friends are standing in it, they're also going to have their essence drained. So, because we were all like, it's a 3-hour convention, we're almost at the end. Do whatever you want. Like, if you want to drain everyone essence, who cares? Like, let's see what happens. And that was the other cool thing, is the group was totally amenable to, sure, let's just see what happens. And the other cool thing was the person playing the Furor Primevalist, the kind of druid barbarian sort of figure. Well, there was only one complaint from her. She was upset she had to kill a piece of wildlife that attacked them. So I should have a spell to tame that animal. I'm like, nope, that's a different path. Animals magic's a different path. So she pouted over that. But aside from pouting over that, like, she immediately started saying, well, can I use this power and alter it and do this? I'm like, you got it. I'm like, that's been one of the main things I've wanted in this game, is for people to be able to take the magic and customize it. So it was cool to see someone sit down. And again, it takes a creative player to do that, or a player who wants to do that. The other guy was perfectly fine just throwing his balefire around. Like, he was fine doing that, and that's fine, because that was part of what the character does. But it was interesting having a player sit right down with the system and immediately decide that they were, in fact, willing to start experimenting with the magic system. I thought that was really, really cool. I definitely enjoyed seeing that. So yeah, it was definitely an informative weekend. It was an informative weekend for me personally, into how I'm positioning myself in the modern gaming world. Because like I said, I really wasn't sure. I really wasn't sure how I'd feel about it. I like I like playing with our friends. I like running for my regular group. I ran this game for my friend Alyssa, who was here a few weeks ago, and her husband, and their online group at one point, and that was really early. That was like 2 years ago, when it was just notes, basically, because I just wanted to get this completely objective feedback. And two of the people had run games extensively. They were two very experienced game masters. So again, it was cool because they just managed to jump in and play around with this world. I mean, the one thing I'm getting of almost everybody who's played, who was of a certain mindset, that the world is what's really interesting to them. And of course, I'm thrilled. Because as I've said, that to me is as important as anything else. And the one guy was like, I'd really like to just make some custom characters with this game. I'm like, well, drop me a line. I'll send you a kit, to play around with custom characters. And then you can tell me if you see anything wrong. It was a great experience last week, even though I missed the chat. I missed several other things. I bailed out of several things, except Thursday Night Gaming, Blake. As you notice, I would not bail out of that to work on my game. Though I admit I was tempted. Going through and making 4 characters and having to do it quickly and get all the stuff together was actually good, because it kind of it put the system through its paces. And they had originally told me there were only going to be 4 people allowed at a table for COVID concerns, but it was entirely masked. Like, as I said, there were 30,000 people there Saturday at the peak. I think maybe I saw half a dozen people at any point without a mask on. And I mean, I know there were points where security, to get into certain rooms, security was saying to people, you got to put a mask on. And that was convention security. That wasn't like, the gamer guys saying, I got to put a mask on, and like having to get into a fight with this guy. This was con security. Like, this was, facility security saying a mask's required beyond this point. No one's going to argue with them if they want to go beyond that point, right? So it was very safe, and I think that's why in the end, when I was shocked when I got there, and it was like, oh, you have up to 6 or 8 people at your table. I was like, I would have planned for that. Maybe it's better I just had 4. Maybe it's better I just had 4, because it allowed me to really focus on the players there. It allowed me a really tight game. It allowed me to get done in 3.5 hours, even with explanation. I was actually really okay with it being a smaller group. I wasn't upset, especially the fact that I only filled once. So after the afternoon game, I forgot to mention I had this one lonely player show up, and she was really excited to play it. She had read the description. She's like, "That sounds really interesting. It's like a horror fantasy." I'm like, it's dark fantasy. It's not quite horror, but it's. And it turns out she doesn't live that far away. She lives over just past Cherry Hill, which is only like 30 miles from here. So I was like, look, if you have an in-person group, which she didn't. That's part of why she was at the con. I said, okay, well, how about this? I'm going to start maybe doing some online groups, online playtests of it. So feel free to contact me. But I felt really bad because I was like, I really can't do much with one person. I'm like, this scenario, I could, but it's going to be a little, it's going to be a little exhausting. And then there was another group playing Villains and Vigilantes or something at the next table, and they were like, they're like, the guy's like, not to intrude, but if you want a game, you can just jump in here. I was like, go for it, go, because this she had not been able to game much because she did not have any local players, and I was like, look, go enjoy a game, drop me a line, we'll figure out something to try this game. So I think at this level that I'm at, I think even making those connections and talking to people is highly valuable. I don't think it's a waste of time to go to these things. Now, again, this was being in the middle of the city right before the holidays was a bit of a nightmare, driving in and out. Because, in my mind, I'm like, well, it's an hour in, an hour out. Get there early, hang out for the day, leave in the evening or at night. It's not that bad. But then I forgot, parking Center City. Parking Center City with the Christmas market. Parking Center City with the Christmas market and another convention, a social studies teachers convention going on apparently. That was, that was definitely, the whole thing was definitely challenging. What was really interesting to me too is, again, I think of gaming in a very certain light, right? I think especially RPGing, and it's funny because I was texting with the local guys about, well, my regular Thursday night group. Like when I got there and I'm standing in the Unpub section, I'm like, okay, people doing the prototype board games, they're definitely a different type of person than an RPGer. Now, the fact that I've come up with a couple ideas for board games and have started working on them, and one is pretty progressed, and it's pretty good, I think. I've had other people play it, and they think it's pretty much ready to get out there. If I brought that, maybe next time I'll just bring that and go sit in the Unpub area and, suck up players wondering about other games, But there were a lot of people there who so don't conform to what we think of as the... Now, I get to the RPG room. I leave the Unpub room, and I get to the RPG room, I'm like, oh yeah, this is the RPG room. Yeah, this is definitely the usual ensemble, motley ensemble of RPGers, LARPers, and, Rennie types and that you expect in the RPG room. It's funny. I walked right in. I'm like, oh no, this is where I'm supposed to be. Yeah, this is definitely it. And what got me though is I was just kind of hanging around after. I think it was after I left the dealer's room on Saturday. I was standing by the one window, waiting for the rain to stop. Kind of making my decision. Am I gonna go down and put another game in for tonight, or am I just gonna go? What should I do? Go maybe try to play a game, but I was kind of spent. I was mentally kind of spent. So, I opted, like I said, to put a game in, hang out for a little bit. When it didn't run, I went out and got food. But this one family walks up to me and just starts chatting while they were getting something together with their kid. But it was this really normal, they were clearly there to look at board games and family games, to play as a family. And it was really interesting to me because, again, this convention really had this broad appeal of, full-blown LARPers walking around in their kits the entire weekend, which, I kind of looked like that too. But it also had this really huge non-traditional gamer type appeal. And again, this was both cool because it shows the diversity of the hobby and how the diversity of the hobby has grown. Diversity in all respects, not only social class, gender, ethnicity, a very multi-ethnic convention, which was cool. Because as most of us know who used to go to these things, it was mostly just white dudes for decades at these things. A gender spectrum diversity, the whole gamut. The whole gamut of gender identification, gender expression, preference expression, a lot of LGBTQ groups and couples there. And it's very cool that the gaming culture, despite the attempts of that, old guard of middle American white guys who are somehow offended by all this, which, again, to me, being potentially one of those guys is mystifying, because I'm like, why would you not want other people who are different to play and get into your hobby? And I know why, because people are jerks, and that's it. But it was really cool seeing this extremely broad group of people there. Extremely diverse group of people. And again, what kind of got me was just this kind of oh yeah, they're here to just look for cool games to play with their family. They're not just home playing Monopoly and Risk. They're trying out these really kind of way out, German games that are really, I sat down to one, and I consider myself a pretty good gamer, but it was really mathy. And as any of you who spent time around me know, math is not my strong suit. And that's kind of what I've joked about Tales of the Harrowed Lamb. When people said it seems complex, I'm like, look, I came up with it. It is not mathematically complex. It's not what you're used to playing in terms of how you're used to using dice, but this doesn't make it this game I sat down to. It was a math game disguised as a cute cat game. Okay, because I was like, oh, cute cat game. Maybe we'll like to play this at home. This looks like fun. No, my brain was like twisting like 15 minutes into it. And I even said to the guy, I'm like, you tricked me into a math game. He started laughing. He's like, yeah, that's what we do. But it was a cool game. It was not casual. It was not like, oh, sit down and play. I mean, you could. It was not, once you knew the rules, it probably wasn't that bad. But to just sit down cold with it. Now, I was with three other people who were really kind of fast at it, so that kind of helped because I kind of watched them. I felt like the kid in class trying to figure it out. So, yeah, it was definitely a cool experience. Where am I at now? I'll take a very brief pause. I'll come back. So I put some stew up, and I have to make sure it's not boiling over. Take a brief pause, and I'll come back for a little bit. Won't be a long stream today, but I'll be back in a few minutes. Does this mean I hit the big time? I have my first. What looks like a bot. Ah, sorry guys. I think I have another call that I need to take. Um, maybe. Hello.
Hi, is this John?
It is. Alrighty. Yes, that was a call regarding life stuff, which I'll talk about in a moment because it will affect the rest of this week's chat. So this is the big time. I got a spammer. Yeah, I just took a look at the DM. Thanks, Wolfie. I'll definitely. I was friends with Jeremiah on the old account. I don't know if this new account is. I'll check. I thought I friended him, but I will also talk to him because yeah, that could be something that I definitely would like to connect with him. I turn the chat window back on. There we go. I truly didn't realize the chat window wasn't up this time. Huh. Well, that's good. Everybody missed this. Everybody's gonna watch this later missed the spammer. Oh well. So. So yeah, I'll definitely be in touch with you and in touch with him. As far as the publishing, I am pretty intent on self-publishing, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to talk to people. Actually, that was what I did with my time on Friday night or Saturday night rather. Once it was clear my game was not going to be going, is I did go and chat with some of the people in the exhibition hall who work with aspects of game publishing and production. And it was pretty worthwhile. I mean, it certainly wasn't, like I said, at no point was this weekend a bust. But yeah, so that was one of my points of angst though. Like, okay, so sword and sorcery, maybe that's not the term I should use. And that's how I'm visualizing this, but I've noticed that it also has gone beyond a lot of the tropes of sword and sorcery, especially with the political aspects. So I don't know. I'm not sure how that's gonna play out in terms of my advertising and promoting the game. Like I said, I've already come up with working on some buzzwords. Let me take a look. I'll show off some of the stuff I did last week while I was busy not streaming. Two finals. Character sheets. There we go. So like here's the handouts that I developed, and it was right off the bat who it is, what it is. So the interesting thing. Oh look, I forgot a parentheses there. Well, I guess I can fix that all now before the next set of playtests. Let me move this over. Move my talking head screen over. Yeah, well, I do have a section, what is sword and sorcery, in the actual game book. But yeah, that's in for game descriptions. Yeah, that's the advertising as far as attracting people to the game is where I'm kind of running into it. I did do a clarification in the write up, the intro to the game book itself. I did start off there. So yeah, so here's what they basically saw when they were sitting down. And this is something that several people have said, most recently Neil, start with play this character if you like. And then the basic who the character is, the names. One thing is I had someone ask about the names. And they're like, wow, so these names are a little hard to pronounce. Can we change them? I was like, look, it's a 3-hour playtest. You can call yourself Bob the Barbarian. I don't care. I said, but just so you know, all these cultures actually have a language that I've worked on. Not a complete language, but a language structure based on something from our own world. And they're all kind of like, really? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, that's doesn't everyone do that, right? In which I'm keenly aware that's not what everybody does, especially in the broader role-playing game. A lot of the, as we've discussed, a lot of the cultures and a lot of the characters are very kind of like cut and dried, stereotyped, and they have to be to function in certain game worlds. So everybody went along with the names. I was like, look, 3-hour playtest, I don't care. Like, I don't care what you name your character. Then they asked about gender. I'm like, I don't care. Like, there's 3 options here. There's in every one of the characters is male, is possibly a male, possibly a female, or masculine, feminine, and then neutral, gender neutral. And the names are according to the naming conventions. So then they have the basics of the scenario write-up. And then something about why you're here. Why is this character here? So, I mean, all of this, even this front page, all I'd have to do would be adjust this text on the front page. And I could use these characters in any one of a number of scenarios. And that's what I might do for the next event, or even for some online play, is have a couple like 2-hour intros where you use these characters that it's just something simple. Go attack a fort. I don't know. Like, stop a evil bandit, whatever. Just to give them an idea of how the game actually works and what it is. And then have this second scenario, which usually runs 3.5 to 4 hours. And they wanted the whole deal. They're like, well, we're here for 4 hours. I'm like, okay, it's all adjusted accordingly. And then here's the fillable sheet. So like the only thing that the players commented on the sheet, the action points, like they're like, you spend action points so quickly, do you really need to track them turn to turn? I was like, well, honestly, I kind of just wanted something else there because it looked like a really empty space. So that was the designer and me saying, well, you use that space, but I can, I don't need to have those there. And I thought about next time handing out like just little, those little blocks, little colored blocks, so they want to track their action points from turn to turn. Maybe there's another field there that is more useful. This is the entirely redesigned sheet. It is almost complete, except I realized I forgot presence as the main manipulation attribute. People were able to use the sheet pretty easily. This was Tom's suggestion. Why don't you just put your die pool and your number right here, your total to die pool, and then like this guy has a modifier because he has an augmentation. He has a magical focus that gives him a +1 to his magic skill. So again, he was really pretty good at casting magic. 9 dice +8. I mean, that was, he didn't fail anything, I don't think. Unlike the Primevalist, who she had a lot more power and she was stronger. She was also a good physical fighter, but there wasn't necessarily the not quite as adept at magic as he is. Well, adept's a game term now. I found that the adept. So we had that whole discussion in our in-person group about the magic system, where they felt that path ratings 1 through 5 that you had to buy up, like levels 2 to 3 didn't give you anything new. Level 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 didn't give you anything. You basically had to buy level 4 to get to 5, but you spent so much on it. I said, all right, let's just turn it to Adept, Initiate, and Master as titles. And instead of buying 1 through 5, you're only buying 1 through 3, and they correspond to the 3 levels of magic. The 3 levels of effects. Minor focus and major focus. At minor, average, and major. Minor effect, average effect, major effect. So they found that pretty useful. They seem to really like that 3-tier system. It was very easy for them to understand. They're like, oh, at Adept, I can cast minor effects with no issue. I'm like, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that was kind of cool. I'm going to readjust pushing magic a little bit because we did see a really great use of pushing magic. And I actually, on the fly, dropped one of the requirements that made it more difficult than it already is, and it's already pretty difficult. And it worked well because it was cool because they managed to get it worked exactly like I always thought pushing magic in a system like this should work. You can overreach and you can do an effect that's much more powerful than what you're capable of, and you might even succeed, but it can hurt you in the process, and that's exactly what it did. And it was kind of a cool dramatic moment that she managed to adjust the space, the battle space, and help the party succeed by using this magic in this way. So. I just noticed this is a little wonky there. The sheets are still in progress. I mean, like I said, the sheets generally were good, were well received. And they will become the sheets that I will use for the standard play from now on. Or a special die. I could do a special die. I'm not even object to the idea of special dice. Like Star Wars does that. It has the fortune die. And I've thought about adding something like that. But again, I don't want another system. Like I said yesterday on text to Neil, I was like, I just want to simplify from here on out. I don't want to add anything else to make it more complex. But like a special casting die or something is kind of thing. Yeah, it's because I had OBS in the background while I was doing that. Oh, special die for tracking action points. Yes, of course. Of course. That was a huge delay, wasn't it? Yeah. Of course, you always need a special die for these games. I did talk to a guy who makes custom dice. He isn't doing bulk right now because of supply chain issues, but he was really interested. He was really interested in the game. He was like, I think it'd be kind of cool to do some custom dice for that game. I'm like, I think so. So, maybe. As we get closer to production, that'll be one of the Kickstarter stretch goals. Custom set of special 10-siders. Kickstarter only 10-siders. Let's see, what else did I work on last week? Yeah, let's go through what else. So I looked through the other handouts that I made up. Oh, there's the InDesign sheets. I don't need to show everyone that. Here are some of the rules handouts, which some of the people who are in my regular groups have seen already. So these were used, and in fact, one guy actually said, "I really like to have a handout of the rules in front of me to reference." He ended up not needing it much, but it was validation that I hadn't misjudged this, because I was like, "Are people even going to look at this stuff?" Oh, gonna have to redo this. For now, I'll probably just put a piece of paper over them when I hand them out. I'm not going to redo these whole sheets yet and reprint them, which was a whole other bit of fun. Some people were privy to my print adventure. Luckily, the print shop, Staples, in this case, was very nice, and they reprinted what didn't work, because it was clearly on their end and not my end. See, instead of all of this, it'll just say it does this in every situation. Though I had streamlined the text there pretty well. Taking actions was pretty clear. They picked up on action points pretty well. And they enjoyed the fluidity of the action points. They enjoyed being able to, like, oh wait, I can attack twice, or attack and then move, or, the action points governing the action economy versus the class kit governing the action economy. So I thought that was pretty cool. It was kind of a nice variation. Let's see. Of course, where to find me is splattered all over every sheet. All right, folks, I've got some stuff I got to do. As some of you know, I will not be on tomorrow. I do have a medical procedure in the morning. So, should be no big deal, but I probably will not feel like coming on and chatting later in the day. Wednesday night, though, will definitely be a thing. We are doing Magic, low, high, and middle, and how it affects world building and play. Kind of a revisiting Magic. Like I said, we're at the point now that we can revisit some of these topics in more depth. But as usual, thanks a lot, guys, for coming on. Guys, girls, folks, people, humans. Yeah, pretty much. Let's see. Yeah, it's pretty much how I feel like it. Last week I kind of felt like I had a foot in my rear most of the week. All these weird little things just made the days more difficult than they seemed to need to be, but no big deal. Got through it. So, from the Tomes on Twitch, from the Tomes, Fox and Board Games at YouTube, and foxandboardgames.com is kind of the landing pad. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Fox and Board Games. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Thanks a lot for chatting or just lurking, as I've seen a few people doing. Welcome to lurkers. Like, subscribe, follow. Thanks to everybody who's already done it in any of these various venues. Maybe some of the folks from this past weekend that I've talked to will jump on and watch this. I hope so. If so, it was great meeting you. Hopefully we'll see you again in the future. And with that, everybody have a great day.